o'clock. You want to start the recording and let's get going? Yeah. Okay, let's get started. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Condo Safety Webinar by the Overton Network. I'm Peggy West, the organizer, and I'm excited to be here, a part of this webinar with the distinguished panel of industry experts today. We are in a time of change, and as a result of the tragedy from the collapse of the Surfside Towers, most people resist change, but change is necessary to prevent other possible like tragedies. I hope today is impactful for you and bring you peace in knowing that this panel of leaders care and they're very active, working diligently to make a difference in changes for your condo safety. Now let's get started. First, some housekeeping notes. This is a 1-hour CEU course for HR credit for our CAMs. Please place your questions in the Q&A box. We may not be able to get to all of the questions today, but this is being recorded and all of the questions will be turned over to the panel and also the sponsors to answer later if we don't get to you today. So please include your phone number and your email address. I will be emailing you a sponsor sheet within about 24 hours of the contact information of the panelists and the sponsors. And I will also be sending out a panelist bio sheet of their credentials and a copy of today's recording. So I truly commend the board members and the CAMs for your time attending today to gain more knowledge on this critical topic of condo safety. My sincere appreciation to our impressive panel and sponsors of today for participating and the efforts in inviting everyone. We have over 390 people on today are registered. So here are today's sponsors. Let's get into it. First of all, I want to recognize Vinteum Software. We have Layla Scola. She is the head of marketing and customer success. She's also the IT support for the webinar. I also have honorable mention, Yasmin Johannes. Yasmin, you want to wave? She is also on the call. She is the Wind Beneath Our Wings marketing manager for Vinteum Software. Cannot thank you ladies enough. Layla, would you like to say a few words about yourself and Vinteum?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peggy. My name is Layla. I've been working with Vinteum Software for the past 5 years. I have an MBA in marketing and communication. And Vinteum is a software company. We provide HOAs and condominiums across North America with a website and a portal to improve communication and management. I really appreciate all of you being here today. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, these guys have the best websites available for all those who are listening. With that, I want to move on to Beth Garcia Swopa. Beth is a senior VP at Brown & Brown Insurance. Beth, tell us about yourself and Brown & Brown.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Garcia Swopa. As Peggy mentioned, I'm a senior vice president with Brown & Brown Insurance, 33-year agent, 20 years in another state and 13 here in Florida. Brown & Brown, we are a national company, even though we're founded here in Florida. Out of my office in Fort Lauderdale, we insure more associations than any other office within the state. With that being said, as we know, the insurance dynamic world is changing just as fast as these inspections are coming in. So with that being said, you really do need to get ahead with your insurance program. The day of shopping insurance is pretty much over on the property side. Find an agent who's willing to assist you in every aspect of what you need and making sure they're covering the market. Because there are some programs out there that are different compared to what's being offered in the standard marketplace. So I'll put my contact information in the chat, and if I can help you, please feel free to give me a call.
Absolutely. Okay, Beth, she works tirelessly. I don't know how you have time to do all you do, Beth. Okay, the next company I want to introduce is City Quiet Windows. And that is Ben Friedman. He's the president. Did he get on yet? He was attending another event. So I don't think he's going to join us today. Next, I want to introduce Rich Wagner. He's the director of commercial and multifamily for Southern Roofing and Renovation. Is Rich on?
I don't see him.
Okay, all right. You will get his contact information when I send out the sponsor sheet. Next, I want to introduce Jean Ponder, Vice President for Vice Painting and Consulting. Is Jean on yet?
Gene just texted me and he is on his way to a Thanksgiving dinner for his
Okay.
family in a different state. So
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, all right. We'll have his info again on the sponsor sheet. Next, I have Heidi Larson. I know she's here. She's the Business Development Executive for Property Services for Florida Paints. Heidi,
Yes,
tell us about-
ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm with Florida Paints. We're a paint manufacturing company that's local to the state of Florida. So we're all the way from Miami up to the Panhandle. We have about 38 stores across the state of Florida and teams within that. So I work with all of the repaint for the entire state. So if you have a construction defect, if you have a standard repaint, I come out with the team. We have some boots on the ground locally that will put a spec together, and that will include the warranty. We do free color renderings, free delivery, and we work with contractors and construction defect companies to make sure that the products going on the building are appropriate for your substrate. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and we'll make sure we get you taken care of.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. Okay, then we also have Sabrina Ortega. She's Vice President and Association Relationship Banking Manager for City National Bank. Please tell us about yourself, Sabrina, and what does City National do for our associations?
Thank you for the introduction, Peggy. Good afternoon, everyone. As Peggy mentioned, my name is Sabrina Ortega. I am one of the relationship managers here at City National Bank. In association banking, I have been working at City National Bank for almost 5 years. Prior to me being a relationship manager, I was the director of our service department here at Association Banking, and I have worked at a previous property management company for 6 years, so about 11 years in the industry. City National Bank is a Florida-based bank and has been serving the community for over 75 years. We have a dedicated association banking department to help associations with deposit solutions such as checking, money market accounts, and products that provide full FDIC coverage. We also offer a variety of lending solutions to associations to help finance any major project or repairs, 558 claims, emergency lines of credits, or any deficit in reserves. One of the things that City National Bank prides ourselves is in customer service. So you'll always have a dedicated relationship manager and a group of service people who will be helping your account on a day-to-day basis. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me directly and I'll be happy to help you.
Awesome, Sabrina. That's great. Okay, with that, I'm going to go into the introduction of Paul Overton. He is the CEO of Overton Construction and Consulting. It's my pleasure to introduce you today, Paul, as you go into your debut of the Overton Network. Paul is also today's moderator. Paul's vision was to offer education updates on the construction laws with legal panelists and other webinars to come on a monthly basis with many topics. I want to make an honorable mention to Sherry Hall, the VP of Business Development at Overton Construction and Consulting. She also is the inspector. Let me look at my note here. Let's see. He is the construction defect inspector. She's involved in project management and is the liaison between the board members and Overton construction team. With that, Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you to start your class and make panel introductions.
thank you, Peggy. Sherry is actually the brains of the operation. So without her, we would not exist. So she couldn't be here today. She had to go meet an engineer, but perhaps she's on the next one. Again, Mike Paul Overton, and the name of my firm is Overton Construction and Consulting. And I've been in this business for about 20 years in some capacity. I serve as an expert witness in construction defect litigation. I do expert services like cost of repairs and valued engineered scopes of work, mediation, arbitration support. We do inspections for potential projects that would qualify for a construction defect. And we work with about every major attorney throughout Florida. and Haber Law being one of them. So thank you for your support, Haber Law. And then SB 4D and SB 154 came along, and it's very unfortunate circumstances of how we arrived here. But for me, from a business owner, the work was the exact same type of work. It was exterior facade, it was structural type repairs. And so it's a very easy transition to move into that. And I would say that construction defect work and the SB 4D stuff is very, very similar, just the money comes from a different source. So we're really happy to be here. I want to thank my sponsors and the panelists, and particularly Representative Lopez and Senator Bradley. Thank you very much for being here. It's always an honor. And without further ado, I will introduce the panelists. And today we're going to start with, usually I end up reading a bio, but today I'm going to let you guys speak on your own because you're much better at talking about yourself or introducing yourself than probably I am. So let's start with State Representative Vicki Lopez.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Paul, for having us on this very important panel. I am a state representative for District 113. I represent what's known as the urban core of Miami. I have over 500 condos, buildings in my actual district. So this is a topic that's very near and dear to my constituents. I have had the pleasure of working with Senator Bradley over the last year. She led the work prior to my election in November of 2022. And after I was elected, the House leadership asked me to sponsor and carry this very hefty bill called Senate Bill 154. And I could not have done it without the partnership that I have had and still have and know I will have in the future with Senator Bradley. I'm excited to think that we are looking at very different items, not only about Senate Bill 4D and Senate Bill 154, but what's to come in the future. So we're very excited to be here today, and thank you so much for everyone who's attending.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate you being here. Senator Bradley, can you give us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for hosting us today, and thank you for the opportunity to share about this important issue. I'm Jennifer Bradley. Clay County is where I call home, which is North Florida. I represent Senate District 6, which is 7 counties: Clay, Baker, Bradford, Union, Columbia, Gilchrist, and the northern half of Alachua. And you will realize that in a rural county, I don't have a lot of condos in my district, but I chaired the Community Affairs Committee in the Florida Senate at the time of the Surfside collapse. And so after that tragic collapse, there were a lot of groups and task forces really stood up to provide a lot of guidance and suggestions about the best way to go forward. And that was how I sort of jumped into this issue with both Senate Bill 4D and then on Senate Bill 154, as Vicki said, working closely with Representative Lopez, who has just been a tremendous partner through this process, guiding it in the House while we work through it. But we collaborate and work together with the stakeholders going through this entire process. And so I think that we have done really moved the ball a lot in terms of structural safety and ensuring some financial health for these communities. We have more work to do this session. We're continuing to address some other issues in condo ownership. And I look forward to seeing that product work through the system this session. But it's great to be with you.
Thank you, Senator Bradley, and we're excited to see the new stuff after the session ends. Love to hear about it. David, would you like to say a word about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is David Podein. I'm a shareholder here at Haber Law. I work in the real estate as well as the condominium department. So kind of have a unique position to not only see people buying and selling condominiums, but I also represent a number of condominiums, particularly high-end, high-rise buildings. We do everything from the dog violation letter up to the $70 million special assessment, the loan to finance it, all the contracts, all the votes and approvals. And we've had the pleasure of working with a number of the companies that are here today, from the banks, the engineers, the construction companies. So I want to thank everyone for having us here today. And I know a lot of work goes into putting these on. So thank you to everyone that worked so hard to put this together.
Excellent. Thank you, David. James, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Good, good, good.
Good. Well, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. And thanks for allowing us to participate in this event. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James LaGreca. I'm the principal of LG Consultants, also known as LGC. We're an owner representation project management firm, which means we manage large-scale construction projects, mostly capital improvement projects, for condominium associations and homeowner associations, basically taking them from conception to completion. We do have a non-condo and HOA division, which caters to commercial and residential clients. However, I'd say 90% of our portfolio is geared toward representing condominium associations and homeowner associations. It is a complicated process to navigate through, and we help the client get through it as unscathed as possible, minimizing their financial exposure, working with the legal teams to minimize their legal exposure, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, James. And you guys do excellent work. And I know that LGC represents some of the biggest associations in South Florida. You guys have some monster projects, and I'm always hearing good things. And then your counterpart and my friend Kelly Kuhn is here. So Kelly, thanks for joining us. You want to say something?
I'm real shy. I don't really talk much. James said it all. We care about our population, let's say, the people that live around us in South Florida. And we are truly honored to have two of our politicians who, are beyond busy to join us. I love that everybody else is here, but I really just want to, thank you two for what you're doing, because it's great to have a state that is working so hard to make safety number one for our community. So that's all I'm going to say. And I'm just excited to see what everybody's going to share today.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, James. And by the way, I know Kelly to be a very political animal, so he's up to date on all things politics. Last but not least, Misha, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. How are you? Thank you very much, Paul, and everybody else for having us as part of this panel. My name is Misha. My last name is unpronounceable. I'm president and founder of M2E Consulting. We are the largest independent practice of forensic engineering in Florida, independently owned. We have, besides being 37 years in the community practicing engineering, we have all of the disciplines in-house, including the licensing, which we will discuss as part of the panel, which is kind of a tricky thing as part of these. And we are serving not only the South Florida community, but now the Florida community at large, with our 4 offices in Miami, West Palm Beach, Orlando, and Tampa. As the nerd of this panel, I stay at everybody's disposal to answer any question that they may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Misha. So I believe we are ready to go into the presentation. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep. That was smooth.
Excellent. So on May 26, 2022, in response to the tragic building collapse, Governor Ron DeSantis signed SB 4D, the Florida Condominium Safety Bill. And this is a question for Senator Bradley and State Representative Lopez. I think we'd all like to know, what was the conversation after Surfside collapsed? How did this come together? Who initiated this? And where did it all begin?
Sure, I'll start. I think what was abundantly clear after Surfside were a couple issues. One, there were only 3 counties out of Florida's 67 counties that had inspection programs. We have a lot of aging buildings through the state of Florida. that obviously have some structural issues, but there is no process up before 4D. There was no process in place to make sure that those buildings were safe for the residents that call them home. And so immediately after Surfside, the Florida Bar, the engineers, a host of groups got together in a very short period of time. For this process normally takes a lot longer, but they convened and created task force reports with ideas on both milestone and making sure that associations had the adequate reserves in place to make sure that small repairs that are deferred and aren't maintained, they lead to large repairs that are very expensive and can be very dangerous. And so those were the two issues that we were trying to tackle in 4D was a statewide inspection program for all the condos in the state, as well as updating, Florida already requires reserves, but we wanted to update that and change those requirements to make sure that all associations were in good financial health.
Excellent. State Representative Lopez, would you like to add to that?
So I will just say that I think Senator Bradley did, in fact, sort of give you a sense of urgency after Champlain Towers fell. And I think that was the genesis for Senate Bill 4D. Luckily, as is the, kind of pattern in the legislature, when you have to pass something kind of quickly to be in response to a tragedy or a crisis, we were able to come back last year to really, start providing more clarity and guidance. I think a lot of people after Senate Bill 4D, those who had to implement it had so many questions, and I'm grateful that both the House and the Senate decided that it really required a far more thoughtful and intentional process. And that's exactly what Senate Bill 154, the product was of, spending a great deal of time with stakeholders and listening to some of the issues that really did need a little bit more clarity and provide a little more transparency. So that's how we got to the end of Senate Bill 154.
And if I could just add one more thing, Paul. So after 4D passed, to Rep. Lopez's point, there were areas that needed to be addressed and fleshed out and clarified. And so as soon as 4D passed, session ended, and Representative Lopez and I both throughout the state in different areas attended dozens of town hall meetings, which yielded a lot of feedback, a lot of great feedback that was incorporated into 154. We had binders of suggestions from homeowners, from engineers, from associations, and all of that was incorporated. So it really was a very collaborative effort. And I think that's important because there's a lot of stakeholders that are impacted, whether it be the reserve folks or the engineers or the associations or the banks, and they all had a seat at the table trying to make sure that we had a clear guide path to implement what was a real change in the way this has been handled by the state in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys accomplished a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. You kind of, like, I would say, you circled the wagons and you got it done. So great work. Although the most impactful provisions of SB 4D do not go into effect until 2024, advanced preparation is needed now in order to comply. So we have 1.5 million condominium units operated by 28,000 associations, and a little over 1 million of those are over 30 years old, and they're home to 2 million residents. So this law and the people it affects is staggering, and as we mentioned earlier, it's a statewide issue. And I think some of the stuff we'll get into later is like, how do we get all these inspections done? How do we get all this work done? And I'm going to be looking for comments from Misha, from your experience, and of course, David. Approximately 650 certified structural engineers operate in Florida. That's barely enough to focus on new construction alone. And 912,000 condos divided by 650 engineers is 1,403 condos per engineer. So It's a lot of work to be done, a lot of inspections. Misha, what are you seeing on your end? Like, how many of these are you getting per week? And to take note, it's not even 2024 yet. What are your projections?
My projection, first, I would like to kind of calm the waters, if that's the word to use, in the sense of, I know that I sat with Senator Bradley on a couple of those where everybody's started talking about where are the engineers, we can't get them, and so forth. At the beginning, where the initial bill without the glitch bill got passed, we got 12 requests for proposal a day. But the vast majority of those were not proposals, I'm going to call it, to do the right thing. And pardon my, unlike many people here, I'm not versed in politics. So being engineers, we are kind of... It was not to do the right thing, which is do the right inspection and repair. It was just, for how much money can you just write me a letter that I'm okay? And believe it or not, that tendency has not wavered over this past year or so, because first, there is still a lingering thought of they're not going to really go through with it. And as I think they will confirm, they do intend to go through with it. Because I was sitting on panels where the first thing that some representatives said is, I'm not going to let another 100 of my constituents die because somebody doesn't want to spend the buck. So
yeah, that was Senator Pizzo.
Yeah, so the bottom line is there enough engineer if you want to do the right thing? Absolutely. Because the vast majority of condo boards, unfortunately, are still living in the world of, if I just close my eyes and my ears and let it pass, something miraculously may happen so that this doesn't happen to me. There is enough engineers. We are not clogged. We are busy, but we're not clogged with work. And remember, we are in 4 markets. So I can give you the pulse of West Coast, Central Florida, up the coast. We have a lot of demand, but the prevalent request is still not doing an actual milestone inspection with everything that comes with it in phase 2, which we'll discuss later, but rather, how much does it take for a couple of grants for you to tell me that I'm okay? By the way, I didn't maintain my building for 35 years, but trust me, it's okay.
Paul, I wanted to just make a point of clarification here. So Senate Bill 154 did not require the milestone inspections to be done by structural engineers. That is a requirement in both Miami-Dade and Broward County's ordinances for reinspection. In Senate Bill 154, we clarified that it can be either a licensed architect, a licensed engineer, or a team of design professionals. And so I think it's important to note that, here we have 650 certified structural engineers, but there are many, many, many more options for a condo board to choose from. So I wanted to make sure everyone understood the distinction, because so many people operate in South Florida where those re-inspections must be done by a structural engineer or by an electrical engineer, because in Miami-Dade and Broward, they also include electrical inspections. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood the difference between Senate Bill 154 and what some local ordinances require.
Good point. Thank you for clarifying that. Misha, you want to?
Yes, thank you, Representative Lopez. That is correct. Again, we'll get to it, but talk to your local government, because up in Palm Beach, Boca Raton has special requirement for the type of licensing they require. So does Highland Beach. The point being that while the initial milestone inspection can be done by an assorted panel of professionals, the actual repairs that are in phase 2 in several communities have to be observed and certified by a structural engineer or a threshold inspector. That puts kind of confusion in this, because we have a lot of communities who come and say, we already have the milestone inspection, will you do the phase 2 on somebody else's finding? And that's very difficult, and the likely answer is no.
Right. And I think Misha raised an excellent point at the beginning of his comments, and it was an issue that was really debated and discussed in 4D when we were putting the 4D together. And that was who should be charged with the ultimate responsibility of doing the milestone inspections. And, you know, you would hear that there was concerns that there wouldn't be enough capacity, and people suggested really broadening that to a whole host of folks who could go out and do these milestone inspections. But what was very important to me at the time was making sure that we had the architects, the engineers, the professionals in the process, because the milestone is really the heart of the program. To make sure that the buildings are safe. And so I didn't want a situation where the pool was so broad that you could invite, you know, somebody coming in and saying, this is, I'll give you X and just give me a good report. I really wanted that in the hands of the professionals. And we determined, look, let's start with the architects and engineers and allow them, if they need more capacity, to engage other folks, to engage contractors. But ultimately, it's the architect or the engineer that's going to sign off on it, and it will ultimately be their opinion. And so that is something that we're tracking and consistent with what we're hearing, which is if you're reaching out to schedule these inspections, we are not hearing, I have not been getting feedback that the timeline will not allow us to get this done in time. So I think we have the right people doing it. And I do think that there's capacity. And if we hear otherwise, we can address it. But for now, I feel like we're on a good path.
Agree.
Thank you for those comments. Much appreciated. David, listening to Misha, it sounds like a lot of people are looking for a workaround, or they're not believing that this stuff is gonna go into effect and they got more time, or they can just ignore it. I know you represent a lot of condominium owners. What are you hearing?
We do. So I think you can't paint the condominium association landscape with a broad brush. You have to really look at slices of the market. So you obviously have a wide range in prices and communities. And obviously a lot of the more high-end, high-rise buildings, you have third-party professional management. They're already well-versed in working with design professionals, with owners reps, with their contractors. So some of this stuff, there's not as much hurdle, I would say, in just digesting it. And you know, they have outside general counsel like our firm or other firms that are kind of guiding them through this process. So I would say, you know, there's some other buildings where they might be self-managed, or they might share a manager across many buildings because of budget constraints. So I think that's where you're seeing already some of the difficulty and maybe either denial, or not wanting to spend the money, or not wanting to spend the full amount of money to really hire the correct professionals, do the work up front, as opposed to kind of, you know, unfortunately, you know, a little bit more of some of the extend and pretend, you know, which is this is designed to eliminate.
Got you. Thank you. And I think with any new laws or any new systems, I think there's always the opportunity for the unscrupulous to take advantage. And there probably are going to be engineers out there that will charge a nominal fee to sign off on a building. And that certainly wasn't the intent of the law. And I guess one question that comes to mind for me, and this is for Senator Bradley, if you see that type of stuff going on, is there some sort of enforcement maybe that there would be in place?
Well, the engineers are regulated, and you know, certainly if we have fraudulent milestone reports, we don't lay out penalties in the condo bill, but those would be licensing issues with the engineers or architects who are going to engage in that behavior and submit fraudulent reports to the state. So yeah, I think that there's avenues to shut that down if we see that happening.
Excellent, thank you. So let's talk about the milestone inspection requirements. And I believe that initially for SB 4D, if you were within 3 miles of the coast, it was a 25-year inspection. If you were 3 miles or more, it was 30 years. And I believe it's 30 years across the board. Is that right, Vicki?
It is, in fact, but we did give local governments the option if they wanted to go to 25 years. So that is available to any local government that thinks that maybe 25 years makes more sense in their community or for the condos in their environment.
Got you. Misha, could you give me an example of why a local municipality may revert back to 25 instead of 30?
I spoke with several officials, building officials in municipalities that would consider that it's obviously highly political, therefore not in the parley of an engineer. The bottom line is that the bill as it is putting a lot of people in a bind. So the people who thought that they can wait for 40 years, I'm talking about Dade County and Broward, and now they have a 32-year-old building. They thought that they had another 8 years to collect and hopefully maintain the building. They're now in minus 7 years, so to speak, because they have to comply by 2024. The reason why they would consider it is very high exposure to wind, which would be typical of coastal area. That would be probably the only reason I would consider, because that would heighten the probability of being hit. But as we all know, the probability is not something that is easy to evaluate, because the West Coast, for some reason, believe that they are less exposed because their code is looser than ours on the East. And guess where the last 5 hurricanes landed? While one would probably want to believe that coastal areas in general are more exposed because of potential flooding, that can be a secondary problem that comes as a structural impact. It is also important, and I think kudos to the senators and representatives here, that they actually threw a blanket over the entire state by saying we are all commonly exposed to these issues. And therefore, I think that the fact that we now have actually a nominal and uniform way of making the building safe for human occupancy is already a great step. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. James, I can't see you in my little Hollywood square, but I know you're there.
I'm here.
My firm has been asked many, many times to get involved in these because the manager or the board, they just don't know what to do, or they don't know an engineer, and they've asked us to step in and kind of act as an owner's rep and consult with them. Is that happening for your firm, and how are you handling that?
Yeah, well, we've definitely gotten busier over the last year or two as a result of everything that's taken place that we've been discussing, and we've noticed that most communities haven't really changed their ways, meaning these types of communities are notorious for kicking the can down the road and trying to put off for tomorrow what they should be doing today. That being said, this new bill, which is mandating these inspections sooner than later, is good on all fronts. It's forcing the hand of the communities to move forward with these inspections, to move forward with correcting the defects and deficiencies found through those inspections, and getting ahead of these types of repairs 10 years plus sooner than they might have, or and in some cases a lot longer. So yes, we are getting a lot more activity, from a business perspective, which is a good thing. We still notice that a lot of people are uneducated when it comes to the nuts and bolts of this bill, the nuts and bolts of the procedure, and that's where we come in. We help them understand what they're up against, from a mandate perspective. We help them understand the trajectory of events that must take place prior to commencement of any repairs to these deficiencies found, which is the planning and pre-construction that goes into these types of endeavors. And I think that once the communities, the boards, management companies have a better understanding of what's required, better understanding of the events and tasks that must be performed prior to correcting these deficiencies, like I mentioned. It helps them wrap their head around what needs to be done. It helps them swallow that pill, as we like to say, right? Because these could become very expensive endeavors. And like Misha mentioned earlier, it is taxing on the people in the community, and it's created a lot of financial woes for the members of the community, which is why they're looking to cut corners. But I think that if people have a better understanding of what is required, why it's required, what needs to be done to get to the finish line, it helps them digest it a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think I think the number one question is, how do we pay for this? And, it could change, for the most part, what type of people live in these condominiums, but it was something that needed to be done. I want to talk about timelines for a minute. So hopefully the state representative and senator can add some insight here. So we do our milestone inspection, and two things can happen. Either they can find something that structurally compromises the building, or they don't. And if they don't, they get signed off by the engineer or the architect, and there's nothing that needs to be done. Or they find something, and then we need to go to a phase 2. And then there's a phase 2 done, and that's more like what I would consider like destructive testing, where we're opening stuff up and we're documenting there's going to be a major repair project. So perhaps elected officials can help everybody understand the timeline. Once you do your initial phase 1 inspection, how long do you have to do your phase 2? And from phase 2, how long do you have to commence repairs?
Okay, so you have a phase 1 inspection has to commence 180 days after the association receives notice from their local law enforcement. And then the phase 1 is completed. And if you have to go to a phase 2, you complete the phase 2, and then you provide that notification to your local law enforcement that the phase 2 is complete. But if they don't do any of that work, and the phase 2 isn't completed, after 365 days, the local law enforcement, local building, sorry, not local law enforcement, the local building official needs to go and make sure that the building is structurally sound, that it doesn't need to be, that we're not looking at a condemnation situation.
I want to add that in Miami-Dade County, of course, that what they'll do is 2 years prior to the 30 years, they will start sending you a notice. So they give you ample notice. And then at 1 year, they send you another notice. And then at 60 days, I mean, they're constantly giving you notice that it's coming up. And you will have, they don't break it out into phase 1 and phase 2. They only do one inspection. So it's the full inspection. And again, I like to stress that the county ordinances are much more strict than Senate Bill 154. So as it pertains to inspections, Senate Bill 154 does not take precedence over those ordinances. The ordinance do. And so, you only have, if something is found wrong with the building, you have 90 days to pull a permit. And if you don't do the work, because I know there was a question in the chat around, so there's no consequences. There's big consequences, because at least in Miami-Dade County and Broward, you will be sent to an unsafe structure hearing. And if you don't repair it, you don't reflect any kind of sort of attempt to hire the people that you need to hire, they will mark it unsafe, and people will be, there are severe consequences. The building can either be evacuated or they can turn off utilities. So there are some pretty severe consequences for you not doing what you need to be doing.
Sure, Paul, if I could just hop in for a second.
Sure.
To piggyback off of both of those great comments, if I can, I know we have a lot of managers and directors that are listening into this, and I think it's important, for an action item that they can leave with, in terms of they should be putting it on the building's attorney to issue a deadline letter, and then that should be in the official records of the association. So it's confirmed of which deadlines apply to the building, depending on, which city, which county it's in, which different layers of the various laws it has on top of it. And then that way it's in the records for the association for the management to comply with. It's in there for the subsequent board of directors, when they get elected and they can get up to speed on sort of what's going on. I think that's kind of an important sort of flagpole to plant in these associations, when we have, so many different parts to comply with.
I also wanted to add that for all of the managers and condo boards here, as somebody who deals with building departments all the time, the consequences are dire, like Representative Lopez is saying. But on the other hand, building departments are not in the business of condemning building. What they really want for you is to comply. Therefore, if you have a plan and you show them a plan of what you're going to do over what period of time, and that the licensed engineer with the licensing that is required for that will follow your building while maintaining the structural integrity of the building through that process, they will give you a break. What they will not give you a break if you tell them that you go do something and then you don't. Because at that point you misled them in believing that you're going to do certain things over a certain period of time, and at that point they're very intransigent, they will shut you down. So it's not that if you need to do, I'm inventing, $20 worth of work, you need to do $20 worth of work by the deadline. But if you show them that there is a way of maintaining the structural integrity, and that deadline plus 30 days, plus 90 days, you will have a certification letter from the engineer through that process that will maintain the building to be a safe structure, they will let you. Because again, they prefer to have, at the end, a safe building than an empty building.
Yeah, thank you for that, Misha. And I think the takeaway here is, as long as you're doing your due diligence and you've engaged an engineer or architect, and if there's structural issues that you're shoring and you're doing, the needed stuff that you need to do, that you get an extension. But if you bury your head in the sand and you do nothing, the consequences are going to be dire. After a phase two, go ahead, I'm sorry.
To add one quick point about the milestones, and that is a point that was raised by Rep. Lopez. There are some communities and counties in the state that already have inspection programs, as we've discussed, in 3 counties. So the bill provides that if you're an association in one of those counties and you have an inspection report that substantially complies with the requirements of SB 154 of the milestone, you can rely on that inspection that you've already had completed. That will satisfy the requirement for the law. They have to be done every 10 years. So that 10-year time period will begin from the time that report upon which you're relying was completed. But if in those situations where you have a report, communities will be able to rely on those and not have to get another one just to check the box, if you will. So just be aware, and each community association will have different inspections, but that is available under the bill.
Got you. Let's see here. After a phase 2 inspection, we have 365 days to commence repairs. Unless we get an extension, we're doing our due diligence. Is there anything else we need to know about the timelines? Excellent. So this is the slide that we had, Misha, when we did the presentation in Aventura. And I think the requirement still is you need to be have the special inspector designation if you're in Miami-Dade. Is that still accurate?
Yes. Also Boca Raton and Highland Beach. And again, there is a requirement in those counties for the work to be done on a threshold building, specifically the repair work in the phase 2 that requires a threshold or special inspector to inspect that. Therefore, if you if your building is likely to require a phase 2, be sure to have a threshold inspector doing the phase 1, because no reputable engineer will take somebody else's inspection and then certify the work based on what somebody else observed.
No, that's a really good point. We had a couple situations where the board brought us in and said, look, we've had our phase, or we've actually been awarded the job. And we went to go pull permits, and they said, well, where is the special inspector designation form that they need to sign? And so we went back and we're like, okay, where's the special inspector designation from this engineer? And their answer was, well, we don't have that certification. And as you mentioned, you're not going to just take over somebody else's work product. We got to start over. And so obviously they were in a bad position. So make sure you're doing your due diligence. If you're in Miami-Dade and the other counties that Misha mentioned, that you're asking your engineers or architects, do you have this designation? Okay, we're going to move into milestone requirements in terms of transparency. And I think this was a major good thing. And Senator Bradley and State Rep Lopez, can you tell us about these reporting requirements and what the idea was here?
Sure. The idea was, and as seems to be an issue, an underlying issue, just with owners and condos and associations, is just like we saw what sort of led to this process with people not feeling as though they have access and that transparency on all of these big issues that happen within a condo. So once the milestone report is completed, it will go to the local building department, to the local official. The association will get it, but every homeowner in that condo will also get a copy of the executive summary of that milestone inspection report, basically the highlights, certainly with the ability to read the full report. But I don't know how beneficial it would be to have a 200-page report given to every homeowner. They are certainly entitled to get that and certainly can access that. But really what the homeowner wants, the condo owner wants, is that executive summary that really is highlighting sort of an index form. This is the state of affairs. This is the condition of your building. And so it goes directly to all the unit owners. It goes to the building department and it goes to the association. Will be on the website if the association is subject to the website requirement. So full transparency on the inspection report.
Paul, there's also another group that must have this report given to them, which would be a prospective buyer. So a prospective buyer who comes, say, into my condo and says, I want to purchase, unit 809, the owner of this unit is required to give a copy of not only the milestone inspection, but the SIRS, and they have 15 days in which to renege on a contractual agreement, because obviously people were buying into condos and not having any idea, what the physical health of the building was, or what the reserves were. And so that we also put that in because we felt very strongly that there should be transparency with someone who's buying into a building.
I think that's so important, because on the real estate side, I've seen many transactions where you have a buyer and they go under contract, they have the inspection period, and yes, they're getting an estoppel from a condominium association, but that estoppel is not really saying, well, yes, this is around the corner and here's the investigations we've done and here's sort of what we know we're going to have to do and pay for. It just sort of says what the regular assessment is, if a special assessment's been passed, and that amount. So that plugs a very big hole that was there, where buyers sort of were like, well, I didn't know this was around the corner. Like, I might not have bought, or I might have negotiated a different deal if I would have known what was around the corner. And really, before that was enacted, it put too much of a burden on buyers to really dive in and do a huge amount of due diligence and kind of dive in and really understand what's going on in a condo building in terms of the construction, as opposed to, it's nice that it's now mandatory for that information to be provided.
I think it's important to say also that no bank today will give you finance in a building that is due for a milestone, and that the milestone inspection is not, quote unquote, fresh.
And that, Misha, extends to whether there are sufficient reserves or not. Now banks are really getting involved in the sort of, notion that if you don't have reserves, then we can't, potentially take a risk in a building that will not do its deferred repairs and maintenance and its structural integrity reserve repairs. So it is having a ripple effect. And I think David's right from the perspective of the prospective buyer. They have a right to know what's happening in that building, as do the banks and mortgage companies.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things, I mean, we certainly all watched in the legislature, watched in horror when Surfside fell, but the private market saw that as well, from insurance to banking, and a lot of the requirements that are in this bill in terms of making sure you have a structurally sound inspected building, that you have financial health, and that you have reserves to be able to meet upcoming repairs. The private market is already imposing their will and requirements on associations, and so this provides a framework.
Senator Bradley, I want to ask a question real quick. There's a lot of Q&A coming in, and we're answering a lot of them. Everyone's participating, but one question that keeps coming up: is there going to be anything done by the state to offer low interest loans for financing? Is there going to be anything of that type of mechanism to help some of these people? I know Miami-Dade has created something that is some type of a loan program that can go to the individual, but it's pushed through the association. But is the state going to offer any assistance or a mechanism to help with the rising costs or the costs that are incurred with these inspections?
I think that I do not foresee a statewide low interest loan program to be able to complete the milestone inspections. I know that those have been done on a county level. I think that what we could do in future legislation that we're exploring now is trying to make sure that finance vehicles, that if associations need to use forms of financing to be able to carry out these, that they are clear, they are set forth, and that banks are comfortable lending in that regard to be able to spread out the payments. I think you can also get, it doesn't really go to milestone, but there's talk about adding condos into My Safe Florida. So you can do hardening efforts, and that gives grants matching that would give, if it were to be expanded in that way, grants to condo owners to be able to harden the condo and their property, and hopefully that will on the back end alleviate insurance costs, but it also is upgrades and structural for the condo roof in particular.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know I want to get James and David both involved here, because I know that they're on the front lines with their clients and the financial impact this is having on getting these repair projects done. James, can you let us know what you're seeing and what your recommendation is in terms of financing?
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of these communities don't understand what they're up against financially speaking at the beginning, they don't know how much to go for loan. And they don't know how to collect the money to at least get started and gather the information needed to understand what the full loan is going to cost, right? Because at the end of the day, what do we need to do? We need to define the scope of work with a high level of certainty so that it can be properly priced, preferably competitively bid. And then at that point in time, the client is going to know the scope of work, how much it's going to cost, and more often than not, how long it should take to correct these deficiencies found. But they won't know until then. So how do they get from point A, which is starting the process, to point B, which is going for loan? So what we do with a lot of our clients is we say, look, let's establish the soft costs associated with all the professionals you're going to need to get from point A to point B. And you can either add it to your yearly budget so that you have the money to at least get the professionals working so that we can all do our due diligence, perform the appropriate inspections, generate the appropriate reports, take you through the appropriate process. and collect all the information you need to understand the three main components of any given project: scope, time, and money. And it's at that point in time that they can go to the community with confidence and say, hey, folks, this is the work that we're up against. This is the timeline associated with said work. And very importantly, this is the cost associated with said work, right? Because we're not designing to budget, right? We're budgeting to design, meaning the deficiencies, the repairs, the replacement dictates the cost. It's not the other way around. They can't set that financial threshold of pain and say, this is all we care to spend. That's not the way it works. So we have to do our due diligence in the beginning, and they're going to need a small piece of change to get there. That being said, what we do when we're brought on board is we generate that soft cost budget, so to speak, to get them to the point where they have enough information that then they can either go for assessment, go for a loan, and have a better understanding what they're up against financially.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And to piggyback off James' comment, I would recommend to associations, don't blow a hole in your regular budget doing this due diligence to plan for these large projects. Exactly like James said, make sure you're supplementing or you're adding to your regular budget some of these professional fees so you can really do the hard work up front. And it's going to cost some money in terms of the consultants, destructive testing, but that's going to pay large dividends on the back end where you are really going to have much more certainty with your estimates when you go to your community and say, hey, we need to pass a special assessment in this amount for this purpose, and we're proposing to finance it with a loan in this way. I think, one thing that sometimes gets commingled here in terms of getting a loan, or like the basis of it is there still is a special assessment that needs to be passed and repaid by the unit owners. Layering a loan on top of that, it's just sort of a mechanism that allows people to pay over time as opposed to paying on a much more difficult and accelerated basis, whereas, before you were seeing special assessments paid in a lump sum, or they might say, hey, we're going to do the special assessment, you're going to pay 2, 3, maybe quarterly, and then it's over. The loan allows these large special assessments for these big projects to be paid over, a much more manageable time period.
Got you. Thank you, David. Do you see a situation where people may have to get a loan just to fund the reserves?
Certainly. I mean, you're already seeing associations right now that are not even budgeting and funding SIRS or major structural repair projects. 2023, you're already seeing a lot of associations have their regular budget increase 30+% just because of insurance. And from what I'm hearing is the insurance renewals are coming in, they're going to come in even worse in 2024 than 2023. So I think you can, I'm going to answer your question by talking about other factors. Like there's so many headwinds facing these condominiums right now financially that yes, I think you're going to see associations, they're going to need to finance their reserve as well as their repair requirements, depending on how far behind they are. Because, at the end of the day, a lot of associations have to look at, quite simply, across all of the financial obligations of our owners, how much can our owners afford on a monthly basis for how long before we get into serious collections?
Yeah, thank you for that. So we have a slide here which talks about the milestone inspection requirements. And obviously, there's quite a few things that we look at. And I think with SB 154, there was some language, if we cannot calculate the useful life of a certain item, then perhaps we don't need to budget for that. Can you expand on that for me, please, Senator Bradley?
Sure. And I think one in the list of components, the structural components that were in 4D, for example, foundation was included. And the feedback we got out of the gate after that was passed, well, how do you reserve for a foundation? I mean, that is short of raising the building and rebuilding it. How is a foundation going to be replaced? How do you do a replacement cost on a foundation? So for some of those systems, if the useful life is going to extend out 25 years, then just budget repair, just a maintenance cost on that a little bit. If, you know, if there were to be a crack or something, you want to just make sure that you're able to repair anything that comes up without it being replacement cost.
Excellent. We already talked a little bit about you have 365 days unless you get an extension. The county governments have the discretion to require that the inspections take place sooner than 30 years. I have been in a position where I've gotten calls from managers and they've told me, look, we're behind, we're getting fined, you know, whatever it is, $200 a day, and we need to get this stuff done. So we quit having these fines levied on us. And I think that's an underlying theme here. Maybe all the panelists would agree that, you know, it's 2024 where all this impacts us for the most part. But if you're not assembling your expert team and you're not preparing for this and you're not taking the steps to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, it's going to be a difficult process for you. David, would you like to expand on that? What are you telling your boards?
So the first thing we're telling our boards is, one, these deadlines are like the basic requirements. You can get ahead of these, and you know, all this additional work, like you don't want to do the bare minimum, right? Like I think that's kind of like one of the important themes that we're communicating with clients and seeing boards actually take action on is getting started ahead of time. You know, whether that's getting in line early with your engineer, so you're not waiting at the last second to hire a company. You might not have the best negotiation power. They might just all be booked. You know, it's starting to increase your budget. And I can say this, I live in a condominium myself. We're already starting to fund the reserves ahead of time. So it's a little bit more of a ramp up. So I really think, you know, the overarching theme on your question is we're working with condominiums and saying, you know, you need to get ahead of these things. Like, don't just do the bare minimum. Don't just wait till the last second. Because I think that's where you're going to see a lot of buildings get into trouble, scramble, fail to comply, and, you know, really kind of beg for forgiveness, for lack of a better term.
Yeah,
And if I could piggyback, oops, sorry, Paul.
Sure.
If I could piggyback some of the things that David mentioned, look, about doing the bare minimum specifically, these communities should be looking at everything that needs to be corrected. So just just because it might not fall under the category of required repair doesn't mean that you should turn a blind eye to it. These types of deficiencies found throughout these buildings, these structures, they're exacerbated over time. And if you're going to have all the professionals in place, your owner rep, your engineer, your other licensed design professionals, third-party consultants, contractors, and so on, it's an opportunity to get best value through an economies of scale and capturing all the deficiencies in one full suite, understanding what you're up against financially. If you want to prioritize the things that are being regulated / mandated, then so be it. And you can then, but at least you're identifying everything that the building and the structures within that community need to, whatever needs to be addressed, at least you're identifying it. And then, like we said, you could prioritize so that you can handle the financial impact over time.
Yeah, thank you, James.
Sorry, I just was going to jump in to say that I think I've seen some of the questions in the Q&A and in the chat, and there's a lot of discussion around insurance and the cost of insurance. And I just wanted to add here, sort of, you know, people forget that, you know, condo boards have been waiving reserves for years and years and years. And here comes the wake-up call because we're concerned about safety. And I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of repairs and maintenance that have to be done now that were not done in prior years. And I've seen pictures of buildings. This is a perfect example, the slide, but I've seen pictures where truly some buildings were really left in disrepair. And I think that if everyone recognizes that if you do the hardening, which is part and parcel to all this milestone inspection, insurance companies have told us they will, in fact, you know, give a discount for premiums. We've met with citizens who's told us that there are just some buildings that have not been kept up, and you'd be surprised how many, because if you had the option to either increase your assessments over the years or waive that increase, pretty much everyone said, we're just going to waive it and we won't worry about it till some people thought, well, some board members said, well, we won't even be here. Or we will have sold our place, or, this will be a problem for some future owner. So now, unfortunately, this is where the rubber hits the road. And I'm sensitive to the fact that this may be a very difficult pill to swallow, but it's a necessary one because, we just had another building collapse in Boynton Beach 2 weeks ago. And luckily, no one was hurt. It had to be evacuated. It was only a 3-story building, mind you. We're anxious to find out what happened there because we believe that the repairs and maintenance weren't done. And that building obviously did not get into its inspection cycle yet. But those are the kind of things that we hear about every day. So I think it is important that everyone know that the more that the inspections show any kind of necessary repairs, when the repairs are done, insurance premiums will in fact go down on that building.
That's a great point, and thank you for sharing that. I see people on these boards, and it's a very unpopular decision to move forward with a large repair project. In the past, you're probably not getting reelected on the board, but I think now with SB 154, there's some liability for board members there, or at least there's a fiduciary duty. What was the thought process there, Senator Bradley?
Well, I think we don't impose it. We require that a board member comply with the requirements of this chapter. They have a fiduciary duty to comply with the processes and the milestone inspection report through this process. And so if they're doing that and they're using their best efforts to get the milestone inspection done, to get the reserve studies done, then that's where there's no statutory imposition of liability carte blanche. It's still the same rules of fiduciary duty for the board members. We need the board members to take it seriously. As Rep. Lopez said, a lot of these communities are older communities that have been waiving year after year. And I can't help but wonder if there had been inspection requirements, if people really knew the condition of their building and how bad, the state of disrepair that it was in, would they waive year after year? I don't think so. I think people for too long just haven't been armed with the information they need to make good decisions, especially in these older buildings. A lot of buildings, a lot of associations are doing the right thing. But there are a lot of associations that have been waiving, and that number has been able to be waived by a very small, before 4D, by a very small number of people, just a majority of quorum, which could be a very low number. And if you were another owner in that association, you may not even know what the state of the building was, and they were just waived year after year. And for those folks who look up and say, oh my gosh, we're in disrepair and we have, to collect our reserves, I feel for them. They should, this transparency should have been in place a long time ago. But we have to start, changing that course and saying, we're going to have the buildings inspected, and you have to be in good financial health so that if your roof is failing, that you owe it to your owners to be able to have the money there to replace the roof to protect the property.
We have found, actually, as it relates to that, exactly what Senator Bradley is saying. You have actually boards that are running on a politics of we guarantee that there will not be new assessments. Mm-hmm. Unlike the previous board who is making you spend all this money on this unnecessary repair, we, on the other hand, will waive, postpone, and so forth. We made presentation to numerous boards of what they need to do that were not in the domain of unsafe structure, but of recommended deferred maintenance, only to be squashed by the newly elected board who run on the platform of no more assessment.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it all the times where you have a slate of directors that run for, there's going to be no more assessments. We're not going to pass an increased budget. And like our elected officials have alluded to, it is tough medicine for people to take. I've had to run these meetings as the chairperson of a meeting where we're passing a $30, $40, $50, $60 million special assessment. I've been insulted, I've had people get in my face, but it's necessary in some of these buildings. There's no magic hand that's going to come in and fix the building and pay for it. The state of Florida is not going to hire Overton Construction to come fix your building. M2E is not going to come out there and tell you what you have to do. The building themselves collectively, they have to have effective leadership to get through this. There's no magic hand that's going to help them.
I also wanted to point out there was a question whether we're going to be able to extend the time frame for reserves. Only the legislature could do that, and that is not part of Senate Bill 154. The deadlines are extremely clear. Everyone will have to have completed their SERS and included in their budget in the January 1st, 2025 budget. So I just wanted to make clear, local municipalities may not waive, may not extend, may not do anything related to the reserves.
Got you. Thank you. Great comments. So I'd like to move into the SEERS, the Structural Integrity Reserve Studies. So I think a lot of people, at least board members and managers that I've talked to, they're confused. Like, what is the difference between a milestone and a Structural Integrity Reserve Study? And I think, I think that the opportunity there for engineers that didn't actually maybe work in this space before have moved into this space, and they've added some more confusion because they don't know the difference. And I've read some of their reports, and it's actually pretty scary. But perhaps State Rep Lopez, can you just give us the nuts and bolts of the Structural Integrity Reserve Study, and then we can get some comments from our other panelists.
Sure.
And we can kind of dissect this.
I think there's confusion between the milestone inspections and the SERS based on some of the questions I'm seeing both in the chat and in the Q&A. So understand that the milestone inspections is at 30 years, when the building reaches 30 years and every 10 years thereafter. So that speaks to the building's safety. The SERS is not related to that inspection. It is related to ensuring the financial reserves are available when the useful life of the structural integrity reserve components has reached its end of useful life. And so I'll give you the example I give everyone. If the SERS says to you that the roof has a 10-year useful life left and the estimated repair cost is $1 million, then you have to begin reserving $100,000 per year. So at the end of the 10th year, you have sufficient funds in reserves to replace the roof or repair the roof, whatever the SERS says, right? And I think there's been confusion about fully funding. That does not mean you need the $1 million today in the bank. It means that you need when the useful life of that item has been completed, it expires. So I think that's been part of the problem. And I do believe in the case of the SERS that there's been a lot of confusion around whether it has anything to do with the milestone. So there was one question that said, well, my building, is only 18 years old. Do I need to do a SERS? Yes, everyone has to complete a SERS and include it in their budget effective January 1st of 2025. What people will find, however, is when you complete a SERS, you may find that the roof doesn't have a 10-year useful life. In fact, the roof should have been replaced 3 years ago. So you will be required to replace that. And you will have to do, obviously, a special assessment for that because you don't have money in reserves for that. So the SERS is going to give you either two perspectives. It's going to give you the perspective if there has been a structural integrity reserve item that is well past its useful life at the present time, or it will tell you how to look forward to the useful life of those items. And I think there's just been confusion as I read some of these questions about, do I need to do it? Yes, the milestone is at 30 years and then every 10 years thereafter. And the SERS deadline is you must include the SERS estimates. Now, we did allow in Senate Bill 154, we allowed you to include inflation. And I might tell everyone, if you don't already know, that construction costs have gone up 40% in the last, 2 to 3 years. So if you are reserving, let's say, for a roof and the engineer tells you, well, we estimate it to be $1 million, you may want to know that in 10 years, you may not have enough in reserves, because the cost of that roof may have increased by between 20 and 40% or even more. So we did understand that people might want to be more conservative and include inflationary costs in their reserves, and they are allowed to do so.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So in the past, people were able to vote and waive funding the reserves. Senator Bradley, we can't do that anymore, can we?
Well, no, you can't. Not with regard to the items in the SERS. So the SERS sets forth, and let me just back up a little bit. Condo associations have been doing reserve studies for years. These have always been, and they're a budget planning tool. And so condos for decades would work and use a reserve specialist. They'd come in, and it's a budget tool to make sure you have the money available when you need it. The SERS is sort of a way to make sure, for the thought from the state was, we want to have a reserve study that makes sure that these important items, these structural elements, are included in that budget forecast, so that the elements, that the money is there to replace the structural components when they become due. History would show us that condos that use reserve studies in the past have far fewer special assessments, because they're on track and they're appropriately funding for future anticipated needs. So going forward, you'll have a SERS, you'll do a budget forecast for the items that are listed, the structural components. You cannot waive reserving for those elements. For other elements that are not listed there, it will require now, instead of a majority of the quorum, it will require a majority of all owners. If you want to waive something that isn't a SERS item, that isn't one of the, we call them the G items because they're listed in subsection G, but that list of items. So you can waive, but you can't waive your structural items that go to the integrity of your building. You are not going to be able to waive those.
So
And that's for buildings 3 stories and higher.
Right. Is there a height requirement on the structural integrity reserve studies, or is it 3 stories and above, or is it for all condo or HOA townhomes?
3 stories.
3 stories. So we're going to have 2 reserve funds, right? We're going to have one for non-structural items, and then we're going to have one for structural items. The structural items, we cannot waive funding those reserves.
That's right. But you can pool. There's been some questions on whether or not you can pool. You can pool the structural G items. Those can all be pooled together. And that does provide a little bit of flexibility in terms of the amount that needs to be reserved for those.
Excellent.
Paul, you
sure, absolutely.
I was going to say, a lot of people like to use the term condo and HOA interchangeably, and I think it's important that we clarify. Condos are regulated under Section 718, and HOAs, which are planned developments, are regulated under Section 720. So when people throw around these terms, they go, oh, my HOA, and I go, oh, do you live in a planned development? And they go, what is that? And I say, like a residential community, like, when it says, the hammocks, the famous hammocks in Miami-Dade, and they say, no, I live in a condo building. I say, okay, well, then you live in a condo and you have a condo board, versus the hammocks in Kendall who are truly single family homes or townhomes that live in an HOA. And there's just been so much confusion because they're not regulated the same way, and they're not even in the same state statute section.
Yeah, thank you for that. I hear a lot of people using those terms interchangeably, and it does get confusing. In terms of reserve studies, we also need to include any other item which exceeds 10,000 in deferred maintenance. Senator Bradley, can you give us an example of that and what the intent was here?
That is that was prior to 4D, prior to 154. as I mentioned earlier, the state has always required full reserves. We just also happen to allow folks to waive it. And so the prior to 4D, it was roof, painting, pavement, and these larger items where you can anticipate that if they were to be deferred and they weren't to be taken care of, that you could have issues. And sort of that's been the benchmark in Florida law, and we carried that over into 154.
So we have some transparency in the Sears inspections too. State Representative Lopez, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so I think it's been very important. I think you'll see an overreaching theme here of transparency, making sure everyone understands. You must get a copy. Again, if you've ever looked at a SERS, and I'm not an engineer nor an architect, nor one of the members of the design professionals. So I was actually given a SERS and I could not, actually understand very clearly what was going on. But there is a summary page that tells you the structural components and what the estimated cost is. So you are welcome as a condo owner to get a copy of all of that. That is now required to be given to you. And again, as we say, whatever there should be full transparency, and you will see moving forward in this year's bill that Senator Bradley and I are working on, even an effort to provide even more transparency to our condo owners. So yes, I mean, anyone should be able to get their structural integrity reserve study and understand how that is being used as the budgeting tool moving forward, starting in January 1st of 2025.
Excellent, thank you. Well, perhaps you guys can work on the construction defect stuff for us as well, because we do projects all the time and we will come up to a unit, we're going to remove the entire front face of the building, and they're like, we had no idea that this was even a construction defect. And another thing we always fight is we go through this year-long litigation, and then the board gets a settlement and they do nothing with the money. So anyway, that's probably a sidebar conversation.
They're required to by law.
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you. So we're going to get into, I know we talked a little bit. I know Kelly, he tells me all the time, they have to do it. Anyways, let's get into some of the funding questions. And I know, David, you're passionate about finding your board's money, and like, what are you telling your boards? What are some resources that they could use? And how are you navigating these challenges with these big repair projects?
Sure. So one thing we talked about a little earlier in the presentation is the special assessment, the money you're actually raising amongst your owners. You can finance that with a loan. The loan allows it to be paid over a longer period of time, smaller monthly or quarterly payments, depending on how it's structured. So I would recommend to associations to really work with your management team, your owner's rep, your attorney, and first and foremost, find out which lenders they've worked with. The condominium loan, it's kind of a niche product. There's no mortgage, there's no title insurance. The bank, the lender, they're taking an assignment of the special assessment and lien rights. So it's kind of a different loan product. It's structured in a different way. So there's a handful of banks that really specialize in it. And I tell my associations, be cautious for just purely shopping the absolute cheapest or best terms or what someone's going to do with your deposits. You want to work with a bank that already has experience in this industry, because I've professionally, I've worked on transactions and loans with banks where they may have said, oh, we have a relationship with, we're already working with the association, or they want to get into the space, and it's just very difficult. You already have a stressful process passing these large special assessments. So you want to make the funding part of it a little bit easier. So number one is work with experienced professionals. There's handfuls of banks that are very good at this and really understand this niche product. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, thank you. James, what are you and Kelly advising your clients in terms of getting funding for these projects? And what type of resources perhaps that you could share with us to help get these people money?
Yeah, well, I mean, David said it very well, right? So funding the special assessment is a key part of making this whole process financially feasible, and finding the appropriate lending institution. It could be a little bit of a challenge, but also, like David mentioned, there's only a handful of lending institutions out there that truly specialize in these types of loans and can be competitive, so to speak. So first and foremost, like I mentioned earlier, it's exceptionally important to understand what you're up against from a scope definition perspective, which then gets priced so you understand what you're up against from a financial perspective. Once you have that information, then obviously you'll pass special assessment. If you choose to fund said special assessment via loan, then you'll most likely vote on that as an association. If I'm speaking out of turn, David, you can correct me, but I believe associations have to vote on seeking a loan. And then at that point in time, you can get the best terms and conditions, the best rate. They're not that competitive these days. You don't need me to tell you that. However, there are some lending institutions out there that want the business, and they're willing to work with some of these associations to make it a little bit more appealing. You have to do your due diligence with the lending institutions the same way you have to do your due diligence with every other part of this project, because getting funding for these projects is part of the equation. It's part of those tasks that I mentioned that are 100% necessary prior to commencement of construction.
Yeah, and to jump in on James' point, so it actually depends within the condominium documents. Yes, the association has to vote to approve of going forward with a loan. Depends on your documents, what level of vote do you need, whether it's just a board vote or you need to go to the unit owners to get a vote. And this is something that I expect might be further revised in sort of Condo 3.0 bills, in terms of empowering board of directors to be able to vote to get a loan to fund these mandatory requirements. So then you're not stuck in this chicken and egg situation where your condominium declaration says only the owners can vote to get a loan, but then the owners are voting against the loan, and the board's saying, well, hey, what are we going to do? Just special assess and enforce that on them? So I think that's something that's in discussions as well, that our elected officials could probably speak to a little bit.
Yeah, so you're talking about a situation where we can empower the board members to actually pass a vote to get the money, rather than going to the membership and getting 50% and then a percentage of that yes votes. Is that what you mean, David?
Yeah, because some condominium declarations require you to get a vote of the ownership over a certain threshold to go and get the loan. Whereas like the power to special assess, for common element repairs, that's vested with the board most of the time, but sometimes there's discrepancy where you have to go out to the owners to get approval for the loan. So then it's like, okay, is this board not popular with the owners? Are they then running into trouble with, hey, we need to get this loan to actually pay for all this work?
And if I can piggyback on that a little bit, part of the problem is that a lot of the people in the community don't understand that the passing the special assessment is not what they're not saying. No, we're voting against seeking loan, and they're thinking they're voting against the project. The project's going to happen either way because it has to, right? How they pay for it is the question. So as David mentioned, more often than not, the board of directors has the ability to pass special assessment, but also more often than not, in order to seek funding through a lending institution, that has to go to membership vote. And that's the disconnect. I think that a lot of people in the community don't understand what they're truly voting on. They think they're voting down the project, and unbeknownst to them, in a lot of instances, they're voting down a better alternative to pay for it. So it's important for the people in the community to understand everything about the process. That's what I was trying to emphasize earlier, is educating the people in the community and educating the board of directors, starting from what these mandates are, what they can expect, what the process is, and then, of course, now that we're talking about it, ultimately, how are they going to pay for it? And what are some best avenues to get funding, right? So that's all part of the education process. And if we collectively as professionals can find a way to convey this information that's easily receivable from the masses, I think at that point in time, we'll have a much better success in getting the horse to drink, not just bringing the horse to water.
And I want to add that there's another situation that sort of, challenges us. So, some of the condo documents actually say that the exterior doors and windows are the responsibility of the condo owner. So I have a condo building in Key Biscayne where the 50% of the building's condo owners have already replaced their windows and outside doors with hurricane impact windows and doors. Now, the other 50% haven't done anything. So the condo board came to me and said, what can we do? Because every time we go out for a vote, the ones that have replaced it say, I don't want to be assessed for the others that haven't paid for it yet. So we have to figure out a way in which we give those that have already completed their upgrades, if you will, a credit. So then they'll absolutely vote to ensure that the rest of the building, because right now you have half the building that is hardened and the other half that is not. So they can't get an insurance discount. And it's complicated because of the way the condo documents have been written, that it has to be a majority of all the condo owners. But you see, if I've already paid for mine, I'm liable to always vote no if I'm going to be included in another assessment. So, condo documents designating what is common elements and what is the responsibility of owners further complicates this whole discussion that we're having now. So hopefully we can fix that moving forward as well.
Yeah, and I could speak to that a little bit. I'm sorry to interrupt, Paul. With a lot of our clients, that has happened, and many of the unit owners have swapped out their windows and doors for impact rated windows and doors. And when it comes time to fortify the rest of the envelope, so to speak, and it has to go to vote, we take into consideration the credit that each individual unit owner would get for that assessment, and credits are ultimately provided. Of course, it's case by case, association by association. But if it's approached properly and approached in that way, you will get the vote more often than not always, but more often than not, you'll get the vote, because then people aren't paying for somebody else's windows when they paid for their own. Since we're using windows and doors as an example. So yeah, it definitely can be done if it's approached that way.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd just like to interject, if I could. Having experience in working with board members to gain their business and take over their management program, as a former business developer, it's all about communication. The message has to get out to the residents, past the board, and the board needs to be really open to communicate. Hey, if you paid for it, we're going to give you a credit, maybe a newsletter, or use your website, or however you want to convey the message. But communication is everything.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have time for a few questions, so I'm going to field a couple. I have asked for the structural inspection. It was finished in May. The board has not responded to my request. Where can I report to the state so that we are able to obtain the report? Senator Bradley, you want to field that one?
Yeah, this is just, the access to records is just something that we just hear over and over and over again. And the requests get sent to DBPR, and that agency tries to assist owners in getting access to records. The milestone inspection is part of the official records. That information should be provided to the owner upon request. And for associations with 150 units or more, that should also be per SB 154. That should also be on the website. We are looking at reducing the number of units that require a website down to 25, so that all of these documents for condo associations through the state, all of the official records, including the SIRS and the milestone, that's all uploaded on these websites that will be audited by DBPR. hopefully that takes issues like this that are really maddening for homeowners who are potentially faced with costs as a result of these studies, and they want to see them and they have a right to see them. So I would suggest, I don't know where this individual lives. I don't know what part of the state they're in. They are welcome to reach out to my office. I'm sure Rep. Lopez's office, and we can try and get the documents. We can try and get it. This is really not acceptable. If the, these have been paid with association dollars, they should have access to these records. There's a complaint process at DBPR. Engage your local official. I just hate to continue to hear these stories of boards not providing owners access to documents.
Our experience on that has been that when a board doesn't like the report of engineer number one, rather than moving on to what engineer number one says, they will shop for engineer number two, who is the cousin of the uncle of the sister of the brother-in-law, who will tell them that they're just fine by painting the rebar who already spalled its concrete.
Right. But to your point, Misha, those reports are each one of those reports is the owners have a right to receive a copy of those.
Absolutely.
And so that's just very, very important as we go through the process.
Agreed.
Milestone is every 10 years after a 30-year is complete. How often will Sears be required?
Every 10.
Anybody want to field?
Every 10.
Every 10 years. Let's see. I would like to better understand how the inspections will inspect the foundation, concrete, plumbing, and electrical. Misha, do you want to tackle that one?
We'll open a chat in that. The simple answer is you get an experienced individual who will visually observe all of the components that are outlined in the milestone inspections, and they will fork in the road. You pass, you fail. You pass, you get a letter, you move on with life. You fail, there is a phase 2 that may include destructive observations that will give you what is wrong, why it's wrong, and a protocol of how to repair it. And essentially that report also gets copied to the building official and to the board. But
excellent.
How you do it, you go to an engineering school and then you graduate and you do this for 20 years and then you know what to do.
Sears questions beg for its own webinar. So the good news is we are going to do a webinar just on reserve studies in Sears, because I know there's a lot of misunderstanding on how much people have to reserve. I've heard from many reserve analysts, and they all seem to have a little bit of different opinion how we have to reserve for these repairs. So, Lori, that is in the works.
I also think it's
components
important, Paul,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
To say that, if an item has a useful life of greater than 25 years, you don't have to reserve for it, which is yet another, misunderstanding that people have. So we just wanted to make sure people know that you're reserving for things prior, that have less than a 25-year useful life.
But only for deferred maintenance of such items. In other words, you don't plan on the reserving to repair your foundations, quote unquote, but you would need to reserve to maintain them properly. For example, if it's piles or stuff like that. So deferred maintenance, yes. Replacement, no.
And Paul, can I interject one more point?
Of course.
I think that a lot of what we're hearing is really educating not only unit owners, educating boards. And as we go forward to this session and looking at Condo 3.0, if you will, board education has been a real priority. There's no requirement for boards to have any education to serve on these boards, handling million-dollar budgets with kind of complex statutory requirements. Right now, you can just check that you've read the declarations and you're going to do your best. But we are going to, in this bill as it's drafted, and we still have to work it through the process. But both Rep. Lopez and I would like to see some requirements that board members are educated. They take a course put on by DBPR or private provider to step them through so that board owners are really armed with the knowledge of what they're required to do, what the timelines are, what the reserves are, what the milestones are, all of that. And then, every year, every couple years, do a legislative update, both for existing board members and new board members that are elected in. We really have to make sure that the people that are running this, that are serving on these boards, and it's public service, they're not getting paid to do this. But we really need to better educate our boards through the state.
I agree. And I think it's an excellent idea to have a board certification process so that they understand these issues. And I think the board members are more apt to do the right thing if they've been through a certification and they've taken the time, to learn these things. I think that's going to help them not only make better decisions, but I think they're going to be more adequate board members. Are the components within the structural reserve required to be fully funded? And if so, which method will be used, straight line or pooling?
Cool.
That's probably a whole nother webinar, but do you want to try to?
Yeah, the short answer is pooling.
Yeah.
And then you fund it over the life expectancy of the app.
Right.
Does the milestone inspections need to certify the state of the electrical and plumbing systems? Misha?
In Miami-Dade, electrical, yes. And I think that to what the Representative Lopez was saying, the simple answer to that is the milestone is the lowest common denominator for the entire state. And then different municipalities have the right to elevate that. An example of that is Miami-Dade, that does require an electrical certification as well.
Will the state regulate what Sears milestone companies charge for inspections? Since condos are a focus of this, these companies can charge whatever they want. So I don't know of any ceilings on the prices they can charge. I guess my advice would be get your team together and get these done before we get to 2024 and the prices go up.
I would say try to get some different quotes. I mean, I think that's how you do everything. I mean, or should do everything. So, the market will be, what will determine the price, but I'm sure there will be some competition. And so I would say get 3 quotes and see, where you land in there.
Yeah, and I think the bigger issue is actually what are the construction companies going to charge to do the actual repairs? Because, if the Sears inspections go up 30%, okay, it's $10,000 more. But if construction costs go up 30%, you're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars. So,
thank you for bringing that up, Paul, because that's one of the questions that we're asked always, which is, well, the cost of the inspection, the cost of the reinspection, the cost of the supervision. Engineering fees are an order of magnitude less than construction cost, order of magnitude. So if on a high number we have 5, 10, 15% of the cost of construction, it's really a rounding error compared to what construction costs. So having an experienced engineer actually scope the work properly and tell you exactly what you want, not more, not less, is much more valuable than have somebody for $5,000 telling you, nah, you need to break it all. And by the way, have a nice day.
And if I can add to that a little bit.
And I think not only having a good engineer, but a general counsel attorney that specializes this. And then, a long time ago when I first started, there was no such thing as owner's reps. And that when the concept came out, I was like, oh, how's this going to work? But I fully bought in Kelly and James. These types of guys, if you bring them in, they're your representative. They work with the engineers, they work with the contractors. They're your liaison between the project and all these vendors, and they can help you save money and they can add some value engineering. So,
and you really need that quarterback so you can free up your community association manager to continue managing the building. It's not the community association manager's job to manage your $10 million, $20 million project. It's not your volunteer director's job to manage the project day to day. You need to have qualified people in the positions because this is a very big endeavor. It takes a lot of people to get these projects from inception to completion.
I couldn't have said it better myself, David. Thank you.
Sabrina,
James, you were going to
could
make another comment
That's a plug for
before Paul
LGC
jumped all over.
consultants.
Yeah, well, my comment that I was going to make earlier was in regards to something that Misha had brought up. We see a lot of communities cutting corners, right? They want to hire professionals to do the bare minimum.
Yeah.
No, we only want you to inspect 5% or 10% or whatever, this really, really low threshold. It's a mistake. You have to allow your professionals to do proper inspections, to do proper due diligence. It will pay dividends. The cost associated with these inspections is far less than the money that the communities will lose if the scope is not clearly defined in advance and doesn't go through the proper competitive bid process and so on and so forth. Let the professionals do their job. And again, it'll pay dividends. You will reap the financial benefits, and not just financial benefits, timeline benefits and grief and aggravation benefits. It minimizes everything, but you got to let your engineers do their job. You got to let your architects do their job. You have to let your owner reps do their job, legal counsel, everyone. Let all the professionals do their thing, and we'll all collectively guide you through the process so that you're not paying for it later in more ways than one.
I got a question for David and maybe Sabrina. Are you starting to see some of these loan requirements require project managers or owner representation in the loan language to make sure that this money is spent wisely?
So one of the things we're actually requiring here at City National Bank is we hired our own engineer. So whenever there's any projects that are related to structural components or the building is over the age of 35, we send out our own engineer to review the scope of work and make sure that they are accurately identifying all the items that need to be repaired.
That's awesome.
2 questions. What happens if some condo just doesn't do a milestone? Well, it's not going to be good. I can answer that one. Do hotels have the same type of requirement for inspections? And I think the answer is apartments and hotels are not included in this legislation, but Senator Bradley or State Representative Lopez, I'll let you tackle that one.
So in Miami-Dade County, the reinspection, the milestone inspection was only for residential condos, but if there's a residential condo inside a hotel or inside wherever there's a residential condominium, Senate Bill 154 applies. I think it's important to know that in Miami-Dade County, Broward, and some of the other jurisdictions, they are reinspecting every single building. So apartment buildings, commercial buildings, residential condo buildings, you name it, it's getting reinspected in those very few, local governments. What was important was that if there were condominiums inside what we call a multi-use building, that everyone would pay their fair share for the milestone inspection and the SIRS. And so the residential condominium isn't on the hook for the entire building.
Excellent. I think we got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions, Peggy, and then some closing comments. Are the constituents representatives discussing how to financially help condo owners and associations to finance this expensive repairs without leaving the residents in the poorhouse? So I don't know that there's anything specifically that you're going to be discussing in this session, Senator Bradley, what have you?
Yeah, and I think we discussed a little of that today with regard to the different financing vehicles that are available in sort of using those special assessments to try to spread the payments out over time rather than having them all due upfront. I'll also say that the SIRS are due at the end of 24. So at the end of 24, the SIRS have to be completed. So if you get your SIRS and your budget is due at the end of 24, that SIRS report is going to need to be the basis of your 25, the budget that you adopt in 25. So if you adopt that budget at the end of 25, that's basically going to be your budget through 26. If you get the CSRS the end of 24, you adopt the budget the end of 25, that will be your 26 budget. There is some time in the meantime to, I suggest start early. Do not wait until you get the CSRS. Start looking and anticipating what some of these expenses will be. But we're just starting to get the data in to get our arms around what is the real impact. Where is it across the state? Are we seeing what percentage increases are we seeing in assessments through the CSRS? And that data is starting to come back to us, and we're starting to be able to reflect on that a little bit more. But we are exploring any avenue that we can think of to try to lessen the impact while preserving the intent, which is safe buildings, financial health.
Excellent. You're on mute, Vicki.
Sorry. To add to what Senator Bradley was saying, I think it's important that people recognize that we don't know just yet what the CSRS, very few people have completed their CSRS. So we have no idea what that additional assessment is looking like. For those that have, it hasn't been that high. Now, we're asking, as Senator Bradley said, across the state to see whether it's older buildings that are obviously having to do more repairs moving forward. But many of them that have already done their 30-year inspection, at least in Miami-Dade and Broward County, if you've done your 30 and you had any repairs to do, you're probably in good shape. So it'll be very interesting to see the data come through from across the state, because some of the stuff that I've seen, like, when people talk to me, they talk, sort of in anecdotal, like, oh my God, this is going to cost so much. And I go, okay, so how much? And they say, well, we don't know yet. And I said, okay, well, when you know, then we'll know how much the CSRS is requiring. I think people are just so frustrated because property insurance has gone up, which is a totally different subject matter as to what's happening in the market, although things are improving in the market, believe it or not. We probably won't see it for another 12 months, but yes, things are improving on the insurance side, but people are still, very frustrated about the higher premiums that they're having to pay in condos. And then you have, obviously, the regular deferred repairs and maintenance, right? If you want to replace the carpet in the hallways, if you want to replace the chandeliers in the lobby, that all has to be reserved for at some juncture. And then you add the CSRS, which most people haven't done yet. So the assessments that people have been hit with are probably property insurance and probably just your regular deferred repairs and maintenance. What hasn't yet come, which won't come until the end of 2024 and into 2025, is what will your reserve requirements be for your structural integrity reserve items?
Excellent. Thank you. Misha, any closing comments?
Well, I'm glad to have the representatives of this panel, because we're typically the bearer of the bad news. And I think that if anything should be kind of carried from this, and we tell this to our clients, is this legislation is not going to go away. And I think that if there is any matter that would be important to say education-wise to boards and management companies, if they think that this is not going away, I got it loud and clear from all the panels I sat with representatives. They're not going to let another 100 constituents die because somebody wants to save a couple of bucks. So it is just how we're going to do it, not whether we're going to do it. I agree also with the fact that there is a lot of guesswork about it's going to cost an arm and a leg. And what we have experienced, because we are now in markets throughout the states, is that the buildings who have actually followed the 40 years path in the municipalities that had some kind of certification are kind of okay. And the buildings that were preparing for their 40 years of certification and are now at years 35, they'll just have to speed up a little bit, but it's not the building that has been left in disarray for 40 years. Where we see a lot of more questionable construction methods or lack of repairs is in parallel markets that did not observe that, or that some of the certification done prior to this have not done using a stringent criteria of passing versus failing. I see now that because it is statewide and there is a floor that establishes what needs to be done, this is going to be actually a great improvement to the overall safety for all our citizens. So thank you.
Thank you,
Paul,
Misha. David,
I got something I want to say.
Okay.
And one thing I want to say is I've spoken to a lot of people on this panel in length. I've spoken with Paul, I've spoken with Kelly, I've spoken with Misha, and I want to say that we're extremely empathetic to what's going on. We weren't popping champagne bottles when this legislation happened. We had a very successful practice. Misha's been in business for a number of years, and we've always done extremely well. We know that this is hard. We know that this is difficult. And that's why we're spending most of our time on education so that everybody can understand what is going on. It is not easy. It is stressful. And we understand that. We're trying to be as sensitive and as delicate to the number as possible, but upholding everything that the senators have passed. So we just wanted to let you know that we're extremely sensitive to the subject and we're very empathetic. So I just wanted to add that.
Oh, great. That's great, Rudy. And you're absolutely right. And I'm very appreciative to everybody on this panel and all our sponsors, you know, they donate their time to help educate these people. And as particularly Senator Bradley and State Rep Vicki Lopez, thank you so much for being on this panel. The clarification, the insight that you've added is invaluable. And we certainly look forward to future events and educating these people. And we're going to get through this. Do we got time for one or two more, Peggy, or do we got to shut it down?
You have until 2, so or 5 till I need a minute. It's
all right,
2.
David, you got any
So
closing comments?
it is though.
Yes.
We need to get you a new watch, Peggy.
It's 2:01.
2:01.
There
Is
it's
anyone else?
It's
No wonder she's
2:01.
always late.
You can reach out to me if you have questions. Podein@haber.law. Happy to answer questions. You know, we do this stuff all day long, and it's very important. And it's very serious work, and you know, it will be a tough few years, but we're here to help. Reach out as need be, and I want to thank our elected officials that have turned a lot of attention to kind of this niche area that, you know, a lot of the professionals that have been working in this area, we kind of all know each other and have been working on this condo stuff for many, many years now. But I appreciate that now our elected officials are turning their attention to this condo world because we need their help as well.
Absolutely. James, rapid fire.
Okay, you got it. Well, thank you everyone for all your input, especially the state representatives. It's been a big help in general. Aside from life safety being the biggest concern, you know, this is for all the listeners out there. Keep in mind one thing: when you do this work, you're increasing the value of your condos because it's giving the condos a clean bill of health, so to speak, and a healthy reserve also adds to the value of your community. I know a lot of people are concerned about money. I saw the comments on the Q&A and on the chat, and that's why I chose to say that. So it's an investment. And it's not just, most importantly is the life safety component, but you're also increasing value of the community as a whole. But anyway, thanks again for everyone and their input. It was, you know, our pleasure to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Peggy, do you got any final comments?
Yes, I just want to say ditto to all the information today we collected with the panel and even the sponsors that chimed in. I want to extend also, because it's the end of the year, there aren't any webinars planned for December that I'm going to be working on, but I want to extend appreciation and gratitude to all of the guests who have been attending the entire year of 2023. And I hope to see more of you or all of you in 2024. I want to mention that the CAMs, please allow about 10 days to have your credits posted by Overton Construction. And just to let you know in the future, Paul has planned Overton Network webinars touching on construction defect and successful construction projects, and also reserve study courses, more in depth and more in detail with some reserve companies. Please watch for the announcements that are going to be going on. I'm going to be having in January a roofing webinar that's going to be a panel of distinguished inspectors and leaders in the roofing industry. And we are going to continue with M2E Engineering with their monthly webinars starting in January again. So those dates will be announced. And I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Be safe and enjoy your turkey and your pumpkin pie with your families and friends.
Thank you.
Right, thank you,
Thank
Peggy.
you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Everyone, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Bye-bye.